Hello, I am Flashmob and I am here to record the Beatport studio sessions. I am at the House of Glass where I do all my mixes, and so thank you Beatport, thank you for having me, and thank you to everyone that follows Beatport and that hopefully will buy my track that I am about to present. It's a very important year for me. I'm about to release on Compact and Hot Creations, but I'm here to present my next release coming on Snatch on the 1st of December. It's made of 2 tracks. One is called Africana and the other one is called Ease the Pain. Let's say that one of the key elements for me in my tracks is the groove. I love to give the groove a very personal and unique sound. For this reason I use Maskine. That gives me the opportunity to record single samples and tweak single samples to then have a single and unique groove. Once I have my groove on my Maskine, I then import it on my DAW, usually Pro Tools or Studio One. And then I work on the synths and the bass line. In this case, I also had to work on the vocal, which is a very important element of the track. Let's go and see the 3 elements that I'd like to talk about of Africana, which are the vocal, the bass line, and the groove. So the first element I'd like to talk about is the vocal. I did very little with the vocal. I just put a compressor on it to take away the peaks, so nothing special. I then used a LFO filter called Mutator that gives it a personal touch, so that I can give a specific shape to this African vocal. So the second element is the bass line. I like the bass lines to be fat, rolling and raw. I use a lot Arturia, but in this specific case I used a Serum. I like to play about with and to tweak bass lines till I find the specific sound I am looking for. In this case I simply added a compressor and a limiter. Okay, the third element I'd like to talk about are the drums. It's very important within the drums to find the perfect position within the stereo spectrum of each element of the drums. And also the perfect position within the 3D dimension of each drum in order to give the perfect equilibrium to the percussive line overall. When I finish working on and tweaking all the elements, the groove, the bass, the vocals, the effects, etc., I group them in order for Gianni to be able, in the mix, when I come here to do the mix, to be able to work on the single stems singularly or on the groups. The second track is called Ease the Pain. Let's take a look at the second track. The main element of the track is the vocal that I sampled from an old vinyl. It's from the Salsoul catalog called the Double Exposure. The track's title is My Love Is Free. I really love putting together new flavors with older flavors, in this case 1970s sample with more current and tech house riff mix. With doing this I had to be very careful manipulating the samples, because obviously the sample that I sampled had already some rhythmics elements within it, so I had to be careful with not to overwrite the transients, not putting transients one on top of the other that don't work. So I had to be very careful manipulating the samples. So the second element I'd like to talk about is the bass. I took a bass from the 1970s, and once again I had to be very careful about the transients, not to put them one on top of the other. To do this, in order to do this, I used a Fab Filter Pro Q2 or Square, and this has helped me to be able to isolate the frequencies, and in this particular case, I started very high from 89-90 Hertz, going down and cutting in a non-drastic way. I then cut everything over the 338 Hertz, as you can see. And after that, to deal with the transients in the best way, I used a pumper from Air, since it simulates a sidechain effect. So I used 2 of these pumpers, and in the middle I put a filter that in this particular case is the Pro L from Fab Filter. So regarding the third element I'd like to talk about, the drums. Let's Well, the first thing I'd like to say is that I write all my drums with the Maschine, every single one of them, from all the kicks in this track to the least important elements of the percussive line. I do with the Maschine and then drag them into Pro Tools and then simply do some equalization, as you can see, simply to improve the performance of each element file. And then, as you can notice here, I've used another pumper, but I mean, nothing complicated. They're simply small adjustments so that I can then work on them more specifically in the mix session. So, Gianni, what particular techniques have you used to mix my tracks?
First of all, let me say one thing. The heart of the studio is the desk. In this case, we have the Duality Delta solid-state Logic that comes from England and doesn't need presentations. It's a flagship analog console, fully analog console, digitally controlled. If I press a button, as you can see, the further knob change, and I can control, in this case, Pro Tools, and every single element digitally from the Pro Tools I can control from here. So I can get the best of the in-the-box philosophy and combine with the best of out-of-the-box technology.
Perfect. Do you want to show you the Flashmob and Beatport
I'll show you.
And now the House of Glass fans,
of course,
what you use?
Okay, I start from these three toys, and I have to say that all the elements that build the full groove, they comes into this fantastic Loop Trotter Monster compressor, which is basically a compressor with a mix, so I can do parallel injection. And the feature of this compressor is the saturation knob, which I can tweak to make the sound rich. I use mainly for parallel compression, so I double the kick and I double the snare or clap, and I compress them in two different ways, and I sum the result to the dry signal when I do the mix in my studio. I start from the Fatso. The Fatso is incredible gear that gives the sensation of a tape saturation, and combine this with the EGS parameter equalizer, stereo parameter equalizer, which is very musical and soft, and give a very round and clear signal to the output. This Thermionic, the Culture Vulture, is it's a distortion unit, and I usually most on guitars and bass. In case of the mix I've done for the Flashmob stuff, I use it for the bass. Sometimes I use both, a very light increasing and saturation effect on the direct signal of the bass, and on the parallel compression on the bass I use most heavy effect. On the vocals I use the very old gear, which is called Vocal Stressor. It's equalizer and a compressor together, but with a unique sound. I can achieve very nice EQ curves when I use the tweaks, and I turn the knobs, and I use mostly on the parallel compression and so I double the track of the vocal, and I use one of this gear in insert on, for example, on the second vocals. Now I want to focus my attention to this side of the studio, which is full of mastering gears, but I don't use in this case for mastering, but to deliver a pre-master that just need only few tweaks. Especially these two gears, one is an EQ and one is a limiter, which has not used as a proper limiter, but just to color the sound and give a little of limit for the peaks. And what can I say? It's very nice because I can increase the color in terms of harmonic content of the full mix, and I have the control of the two separate second harmonics and third harmonics, and I can decide how much in terms of percentage, so from 1% to 100% in this case, I want to give in which frequency I want. For example, I can drive 40% on 6000, and the overall effect can be set to, I don't know, 40%. And then on the third harmonics, I can do the same, on different levels, of course. And this color, the mix, it's my secret weapon now, and I use in every mix. This gear combined with a multi-band compressor and the NEQ gives me a pre-master that fit the Flashmob needs.
Okay, that was the mix. Thank you, Gianni. Thank you, House of Glass. Thank you, Beatport. Flashmob, Ease the Pain, EP, Snatch Records, 1st of December. Thank you. Ciao, Flashmob.
Ciao.